Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and a literal stack of Christmas cards. I have been waiting for this Pretty Pink Posh tree cover plate wafer die to come back in stock. This was part of their October holiday release. I've already done a couple videos using other products from that release at the beginning of this year's holiday series. So they'll be linked in the playlist that's linked at the end of this video. And it came back in stock because it's been popular, and I pulled it out along with some pattern paper. I used some more of my pattern paper. I used some of this Honeybee Pinstripes and Polka Dot Spring pack because why not? They have a holiday one, but I wanted to go sort of non-traditional colors. And I've shown these packs in like release and reviews and stuff, but they're literally pinstripes on one side and then polka dots on the opposite side. So you can, you know, flip them and get different patterns. So that's what I did. I did just tons of die cutting and mixing and matching. I pulled out my sewing machine for some of them to attach them, all the things, and ended up making a stack of Christmas cards. So if you keep watching, I will show you guys how I made these cards. So the first step to making all of these cards was to pick out the pattern papers. So I just flipped through the pack and picked several. Like, it was just like, this one's pretty, this one's pretty. They're all pretty, but I was like, I had no real, I had a rough idea of what I was going to do. When I started, I didn't plan on altogether I ended up making 8 cards. Really, a person could just keep going and going and going with this. It becomes sort of an infinite loop. Once you start doing the die cutting, and then it's like, oh, I could inlay, I could do this, but I stopped at 8. Again, it doesn't take forever. It was more like, ooh, I could do this, and yeah, no. So I picked out several different pattern papers, and then I die cut them. I'm only showing one. I die cut a bunch, and I ended up like flipping what was left of those papers because the pattern papers are 8.5 by 6 or whatever it is. So the remaining pattern, like this one here, I flipped what was left over and die cut that as well. So off to the side there, I've just got a stack of all these little Christmas trees. And then I die cut some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock and some heavyweight white cardstock. And I'm using PIXIE tape just to hold all of the die cut pieces in place. However, PIXIE tape's not very strong. I use it more for like masking, things like that. And for all my other cards, and I wasn't thinking and I didn't film it, I glued the PIXIE tape to the back of these. It's not as strong as washi tape. That's why I like it for like masking and just lightly holding things in place. But to actually hold like die cuts in place like I do with washi tape, yeah, I just ended up gluing it and it worked just fine. So it doesn't add any extra bulk. Like you could also just glue a piece of copy paper to the back. I did that to hold all of these die cut trees in the Desert Storm cardstock, especially all those 2 trees that have all the little polka dots. I didn't want any of those popping out because this is what I was going for. So all those pieces were just held in place. And then I chose different pattern paper trees that I'm just going to adhere on top. Simple, really, just simple. So and again, sky's the limit with this. Like you could make these into like pop out all the trees and turn them into shakers. You could not use the outline area, which I actually do in this video. I make a couple cards without using the outline, but like, yeah, I had this like stack of trees and cardstock. I had my headphones in. Like I do everything in sections, just like I show. When I'm doing multiples, I do everything. So I did all my die cutting first and I just zone out. I've got, a show going or a podcast or music, like whatever it is. And I just do that repetitive task and it's like kind of therapeutic. And I just made my little stack of trees. And now I just start picking out. I've got all these stacks with all these different colors and different patterns. And I'm just going to start adhering them. This is where having my little detail, this is craft tacky glue in a little Gina precision bottle. That comes in especially handy with specifically those 2 trees with the polka dots. And yeah, glued the PIXIE tape to the back. Again, you could use copy paper. If you want to do cardstock, that's fine. Like if you want to create like dimension. These panels are A2 sized, so I didn't want to create any extra dimension because they're going to get adhered directly onto my card bases. So yeah, PIXIE tape, glued it on, good to go. So I did 2 panels with Desert Storm, and then I did 2 panels with just white cardstock, and just played around with the choice of trees. And so that's going to be 4 card fronts, 2 on white, 2 on Desert Storm. And I was like, I still have like 500 trees sitting here in the piles. Again, I'm zoomed in a little bit so you guys can see it, but there's a lot. However, I also wanted extras though too. That's why I did so much die cutting, because I'm going to put some on the inside, because if you watch my videos, you know my cards are not done till the insides are complete as well. So I've got plenty of trees for what I want to do. So I'm just going along and adhering just right on top. And it's also oddly, and I've talked about this before, it's oddly satisfying because I'm laying the same pattern, and I'm talking about the die cut, not the pattern paper, on top of the cardstock. They just kind of like fit into place, and it's really satisfying. So then for the ones that I didn't want to use the die cut outline, I used one of the pattern paper ones. And again, I haven't like tossed these, but you could make more cards with the pattern paper outlines as well. Like this is what I'm talking about, like the infinite loop. I thought about it and I was like, oh, I could make like, again, like 8+ more cards. I was like, I don't have the time. So I just have the outline like just temporarily taped to panels, A2 size panels of cardstock, just to give me the guide. So that they're spaced, the kind of in the exact same way. And for the adhesive, I'm only applying craft tacky glue, just little tiny dots on these trees, and I'm avoiding the centers on purpose. I don't want to glue down the centers, but I also don't want to fully glue them down either, because I'm going to sew these to these card fronts. I thought that would look really fun to just sew, and that's why I used the outline pattern paper here, so that these are like lined up straight. Because I was like, oh, I could draw lines with a ruler. And then I was like, why am I going to do that? Like just use the pattern paper like this. So I figured out, what trees I wanted to use the pattern paper outline, and then adhere these trees with I just needed little tiny dabs of the glue. Let the glue dry, remove this little pattern paper template. And again, I did 2 on white and 2 on Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. And then I just sewed mostly straight lines with white thread. If you want to get fancy, I was like, again, I was like, oh, I could do like green thread, like different colors. And like my brain started going there, and I was like, nope, one color thread, straight lines is enough, because I've talked about this. I'm sewing more and more on my cards because I love it. I love the look of it. But all the sewing up to this point has been like kind of wonky outlines, around the perimeter of my card, because that's where I feel comfortable. Purposefully messy, trying to sew actual straight lines, that takes a bit more skill. I did okay. You can't see it because, again, I filmed straight down. I haven't figured out yet a way to like actually film, because also I don't have anything fancy. But I would kind of line up the card fronts where the needle was going to be, and I've actually got PIXIE tape on my machine as like little guides, same as how I have washi tape like on my paper trimmer. People ask about that. It's just it gives me a visual. It just gives me a straight line to follow. I used to be very, very, very good at eyeballing it. I still kind of can every once in a while, but I'm getting older. My eyesight's not as great as it used to be. I've got astigmatism in both my eyes, and trying to do anything in a straight line, So I had little guides on, just taped onto my sewing machine there, and I just sewed just these little straight lines to adhere or attach these trees. And then I just trimmed off the ends, kind of just right up to the edge of the piece of cardstock, and left it. You could pull it to the back and adhere it. It's just up to personal preference. Some people really don't like it that I leave the threads loose. In real sewing on, material and that sort of thing, yes, you finish it off, you pull it in, you tighten it all up, yada, yada, yada. I'm just sewing on cards. This is just for fun, and it depends on my mood and what the look I'm going for, but I kind of like the loose threads. It gives it more that little handmade sort of a look. But for some things, I will like pull the threads to the back, tape them down with washi tape, etc. But for this, I just trimmed them off nice and neat, and we're good to go. So then my next batch of die cutting is the Mary Script wafer die from Pretty Pink Posh. This time I used my mini machine. This is where a little mini die cut machine comes in so handy. Mine is from the Honeybee Stamps one. So I don't have a link for this because it's exclusive to them. But there are many machines on the market. Hero Arts has a great one as well. This Honeybee one, obviously. And Tim Holtz has one. My brain just kind of stopped there for a second. This is just a little mini manual machine. My Anna Griffin Empress Mini is great too. However, this is faster. I've talked about this in other recent videos. It's when you're doing like multiple, like I did 8 cards. I did 3 layers. So 24 Mary die cuts. This was the fastest, just running this right through my little mini die cut machine. And I did all of them because I'm going to stack each one, because that's going to be my focal sentiment for all of these cards. Dimension is life, and I just want to do it. And it's another one of those things where it's like I just sit and zone right out. I was watching like a movie or something, you know, and you just do all your die cutting. It's just kind of a brainless activity, and I enjoy it. And same with the adhering. I got everything die cut, and then I adhered them again using just craft tacky glue and a little fine tip. Stacked them all together, set them aside. And then, of course, splatter one. I thought about it and I was like, should I? Shouldn't I? Of course I'm going to. So I pulled out my splat box, and I've got just picket fence, like distress picket fence paint first. So I just put a little bit of that on my palette. I'm going to water this down a bit. With the distress paints specifically, they vary in consistency depending on the color, because distress paints don't have like extra fillers and additives in them. It just depends on the color. So certain pigments create a thinner viscosity, etc., etc. Again, it just depends on the color. So some need to be thinned out for splatter, some don't. Picket fence is one of them. One like on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, black soot. That's my favorite black splatter. People ask me that. That one does not need to be thinned out because it's black, you know? So I thinned out the picket fence paint, used my fan brush, and splattered that onto the card fronts I did with the Desert Storm cardstock, because that's where it's going to show up the most. And then for the other card fronts, I added Rustic Wilderness distress paint to my palette. I'm just going to mix it with the picket fence just to lighten it up a little bit, because it's a little too intense. Like Rustic Wilderness is a very nice deep green. I could have definitely gone extra and started like color matching it to the greens of the pattern paper, but I was like, no, I can't. Just tone her back. I don't think anyone's going to care, you know, like, oh, the splatter isn't the exact same shade of green, you know? And some people don't like splatter. I've been getting comments about that, you know, about this like trend of splatter. I have been doing splatter for years, people, years and years. I loves it. Not for everything, but most things. So yeah, if it's a question whether or not to splatter, more often than not, splatter is going to win out. So I did the same thing. I mixed it up, added a bit of water, watered it down, and then splattered this on all the backgrounds I did with white cardstock. And then set all those aside to dry, which didn't take very long because I thinned it out. And then my next little step here to do everything at once is the card bases. All of them were top folding A2 white note cards. I lined them up in my Misty, and I'm using a sentiment from the Pretty Pink Posh Sentiment Strips Christmas stamp set. So I lined up that little sentiment stamp, and I am inking that up with Concord 9th Avocado ink and doing all of them at once because I've got the stamp lined up. So I just put in a card base, ink up the stamp, close the lid, repeat until every single card base has that sentiment stamped into it. And then after I've got that, I had arranged, like gone through my pile of little die cut Christmas trees, and like I said, I had enough to add 3 to the inside of each card. I left off the one that has like the tons of polka dots because that looks a little weird unless you inlay it with the card front sort of a thing. But yeah, all the other ones I just went through and made little piles of 3 and then just adhered them to the inside of every single card. So doing everything like at once, like doing the same thing at the same time. So all the die cutting at once, all the stamping at once, all the sewing at once, etc., etc. It makes the process so much easier. And then adhering all the card fronts at once. So the splatter was dry, the insides were done. I adhered all the card fronts to the card bases, again, just using craft tacky glue. And off to the side, I just have my MISTI and I just stick them underneath that just to hold it down, and then I go on to the next one. So I adhered all of the card fronts to the card bases. And like I said, that tree cover plate is A2 size, so it completely covers the card base. And then the panels that I sewed the trees onto, those are also A2 sized. And then I'm going to adhere my die cut sentiments. I used almost all Concord and 9th cardstocks for this. Again, I just grabbed random ones from my stash that kind of went with the colors of the pattern paper. And then, adhered them to the card bases. Again, just with a little thin line of craft tacky glue. And didn't show every single one because it's all just repetitive. It's the exact same thing for the other 6 cards. So adhered those into place. You could totally be done here, but of course I'm going to add bling because I've got tons of it. I went subtle though with the bling. I'm using Trinity Stamps Milk Glass embellishments, and yeah, just adhered a few of those to each of the cards. I figured out, a layout of bling on card number 1, and then I just repeated it on every single other one, which just made the process faster. Adhered them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue, press those into place, and then let them dry. And that finished off all of these cards. So they've got these like pattern paper trees. So there's the pattern of that, but then also all of those trees have like piercing detail or, the die cut little polka dots, etc. Love it. I love this wafer die. And then the Mary script font. I've talked about this before. I really love the font that Pretty Pink Posh uses. It's one of my favorites. And yeah, I really enjoyed making these. It was just one of those things, and the colors and the patterns and the splatter and the bling and a little bit of sewing. I didn't do the greatest job. I caught them on the top of a couple of pattern paper trees when I was sewing, so it kind of folded them down. But hey, they're handmade, Like, I sewed on these cards. And I had tons of fun doing it. So, to each of their own, So, those were this batch of cards. As always, there will be a link below the video if you expand the description box. I'll have a link to my blog post, which will have the photos of everything, along with picture links to everything used. In the description box, there's also the list of all the supplies I used with links to everything, so you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!